Malbec arrived on the scene with precisely the right timing. People were used to, wine drinkers I'm referring to, were used to Australian Shiraz and were used to that experience. What happened was that opposite from Argentina, Shiraz got cheap, and then the expensive people that were trying to make real good Shiraz, I think got drowned out by the noise of the inexpensive Shiraz. Malbec arrived precisely at the right time and had wines that were slightly more expensive, but that were very well made, hand-picked, handmade, hand-bottled. And you were selling them for $1 more or for the same price against some Shiraz that came from a huge, enormous factory where the grapes were harvested by machine. People could taste the difference. People immediately realized that the value for the money was so good that the word spread like wildfire. That's a huge reason, and I think just that the wines are fairly easy drinking. We kind of moved from Merlot to Shiraz to Malbec.
People like things that they can pronounce. People say things to me like, I'll have either a Pinot Noir or a Cabernet Sauvignon. That means nothing to me. You've just named one grape on this side of the spectrum, and then you've skipped this entire mass styles of wine, and then you've given me Cabernet Sauvignon, the most richest, most oaked, most heavy style if we're talking about New World. What am I supposed to do with you? What am I supposed to do with that? And it's because they can pronounce those words, or they just kind of roll off the tongue at this point. They have enough knowledge of wine where they can say a few varietals. And people don't want to look stupid, especially if they're at a table. They want to look like they know what they're talking about, like they're sophisticated, like wine is going to make you sound smarter or something like that. And so they'd rather order something that they can read off the menu instead of saying, I don't really know what this is, what is it? Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to learn, nobody wants to open themselves up, so they just say, I'll have the Malbec.
Malbec is a marvelous grape. Malbec was originally planted in France. It still is planted in Cahors in France. In Bordeaux, you don't find much Malbec anymore.
Malbec has been one of the varietals that really made the reputation of Bordeaux wine. In the Middle Ages, it was really widely planted in Bordeaux region at a time when weather was way warmer than what it is today. And then as it got cooler, it was slowly but surely replaced in Bordeaux region by Cabernet Sauvignon, which adapted way better with cooler and wetter climate than Malbec.
Every immigrant would come from Europe, would bring some Malbec from northern Italy, from France. The government paid enologists and winemakers to go to France and bring cut-ins from all over the place, in such a way that when Phylloxera came, we had all the DNA of Malbec. I think Mendoza has kept it for the world during this century and a half almost.
Where Malbec really found his perfect land, its perfect terroir, it's here in Argentina.
Nosotros lo llevamos a triunfar en el mundo, lo hicimos triunfar y ya lo hicimos con nuestro terruño, lo hicimos con nuestra cultura, le dimos una personalidad.
La verdad que lo que yo, mi familia, mis padres, todo eso, esto lo llevamos en la sangre, la vitivinicultura. Prácticamente le hemos visto nacer. Que vinieron los abuelos de nosotros, que eran emigrantes de Italia, a trabajar acá, a laburar las tierras en la Argentina. Mi abuelo vivió ahí, en el Cerro Melón, que le dicen ahí tenían almacencito. Él, por parte de mi padre, y mi otro abuelo por parte de mi madre, brasilero. Así que somos... Esto solo lleva para mí, padre, ¿cómo trabajó la vida? Sí, una vida. ¿Qué va a hacer?
Nosotros somos la primera generación con Duriguti haciendo vinos. Venimos de descendencia italiana, de la zona de San Michele e Tagliamento, es nuestra familia, ¿sí? Que eso queda debajo de Venecia. Y se instalaron en la Argentina ya por los años 40, nuestros bisabuelos, digamos así. Y como todos los italianos que llegaron a la Argentina, gran parte tuvo un desarrollo en la industria. Creo que eso viene como que viene en la sangre, como que viene engendrado, ¿sí? por la familia de estar en la industria vitivinícola.
Para la Argentina era uva mala, por eso le puso Malbec. Era mala. Hasta que llegó la época que hubo el cambio grandísimo, que es ahora. Ahora mala se le llama la uva blanca, porque acá la uva es como una reina. Entre nosotros es una reina.
Sí, ha sido emblemático, pero también con dolor en ese pasado de las épocas en que fue un poco perseguido, un poco no reconocido, ¿no? Cuando en nuestro país y en nuestra provincia soplaron los tiempos en que era mucho más importante el volumen que la calidad. Y lamentablemente en ese tiempo se perdieron viñas valiosísimas, ¿no? Antiguas, que hoy necesitamos.
En la década del 50, por ejemplo, aparecen las grandes bodegas del Estado. La empresa más grande vitivinícola de Mendoza, que había sido la bodega Giol, famosa, la compra el Estado. En San Juan hacen lo mismo. Es decir, desde el 50 hasta fines de los 80, el Estado fue no solo un protagonista por la vía de la regulación, sino un protagonista empresario. Es decir, que tenía bodegas acá en San Juan, en todos lados, y era uno de los grandes compradores de uva, elaboradores de vino. En el 88 el gobierno decide que Giol deje de funcionar como bodega, se vende por partes.
Fines de los 70, los comienzos de los 80, comenzó a decaer, empezó a perderse el mercado interno y empezaron a haber excedentes de vinos en nuestro mercado interno, porque lógicamente el mercado iba cayendo cada vez más, y Argentina nos encontramos con que las calidades y los perfiles y los estilos de los vinos que se producían en la Argentina no estaban a la altura de lo que el mercado internacional buscaba. Por eso fue una etapa de mucho cambio. La década del 90 fue la etapa en donde los técnicos argentinos empezamos a salir con más frecuencia al mundo. En el caso mío tuve posibilidades de realizar algunas experiencias de vinificación en países como Francia, Italia, luego más tarde también en California, en Napa, viendo lo que se producía, cómo se producía y cómo incorporábamos esa tecnología a nuestras bodegas.
Yo cuando empecé a trabajar en el año 97 con Malbec, ¿sí? Empecé a ver que venían muchos extranjeros a nuestro país a buscar ese varietal y a desarrollar ese varietal. Y uno de los que primero llegó al país fue Alberto Antonini y Attilio Pagli. Y ellos decían que acá se encontraba un producto que no se encontraba en el mundo, y que ese producto podía hacer que Argentina en cierta medida fuera pionero, despegara si se hacían las cosas bien. Había muchas cosas que cambiar. Había que cambiar el manejo del viñedo, había que cambiar el manejo dentro de las bodegas, ¿sí? Había que cambiar la cabeza ¿sí? Había que haber un cambio generacional, ¿sí? Y por ende había que salir al mercado a vender. En Argentina siempre estuvimos acostumbrados, con nuestras generaciones, de que lo que se vendía era porque venía gente y compraba. Eran muy pocos los bodegueros argentinos que salían con su valija a vender afuera. Entonces, cambiar ese chip era bastante difícil, pero era un desafío nuevo para hacer.
I'm Carlos Basso, and I am the owner and manager of the Viña Maria winery here in Carrodilla. And my son.
My name is Adolfo Basso, and I'm the fourth generation of the winemaker family. I'm an enologist, winemaker, and I am trying to follow the steps of my father.
We have been in the wine for many generations. My grandfather started in 1922 with a small winery here in Mendoza, and in 1935 they bought the Santana winery. Santana at that moment was selling 60 million bottles per year. It was big business.
At that time it was like a dream for the people who worked in that big winery to move to a small thing, quality things. It wasn't the normal thing like it's today. You know?
Viña Maria started in 1998. For me it was really quite an experience to come from a big company where you were with the finance and problems, and finally I could do something small and to be in contact really with what we were doing, no? With the vineyard and the wine process, and being all day in the winery and not sitting at the office.
If I have to say there is a trend in the wine world right now, it's natural wine, which is a trend that I'm happy about. I mean, and natural is a very loose term, but when I say it, I mean something that is estate bottles, something where the farmer owns that land and he's also making the wine. There is a beautiful consistency and control throughout that wine, and a true passion that goes behind making the wine like that. And I think more and more people are catching on to that and caring what they drink more. Pretty much the opposite of South American Malbec, what's happening there.
You know, it's funny because in the US I did not really like Malbecs. I thought that they were a little fruity, and I generally like a drier, fuller wine. And down here we've had a lot of different Malbecs, and I find them fantastic. So I'm obviously picking the wrong ones in the US, which has been interesting.
I'm definitely not a wine geek, but for down here it's all about the Malbecs. I love them.
Soy Ángel Antonio Mendoza, un enólogo con prácticamente 40 cosechas de experiencia en mi vida. Soy propietario de Domaine San Diego, una pequeña bodega que compartimos con la familia. Los 5 miembros de la familia son los principales ejecutores, directores, gerentes de la casa. Esta casa comenzamos el pensamiento en 1989, queriendo tener un vino que fuera un símbolo de mi profesión. Buscando mi origen, es probable que he nacido de una noche de vinos. Mis padres definitivamente le encantaba compartir la familia con una buena comida y un buen vino, y seguramente que de ahí debo de haber nacido de una noche romántica. Lamentablemente, mi padre ha tomado una botella pequeña de avión y entonces esa es la altura mía, es decir, la altura de una botella de avión, ¿no? Los hijos han continuado con mucho entusiasmo, con mucha responsabilidad a este proyecto, en el que buscamos un diálogo silencioso con el terroir. Llevamos casi 18 años interpretando a la viña para que el viñedo dé la mejor expresión posible de vino.
Bueno, es una cepa característica de Mendoza y que está teniendo como mayor difusión en los últimos años. Y especialmente a mí particularmente es la cepa que más me gusta, digamos.
Sí, lo tomamos. En general hay muchas variedades, por lo tanto el Malbec es una más. Es decir, si uno cree que ese es el mejor o el único, no es así. Todos los premios internacionales, en algunas cosas está el Malbec, pero no en todas.
Malbec es el vino insignia de Mendoza, ¿no?
Es una especialidad, el Malbec no es una cosa común, es una cosa seria.
Malbec es el emblema de Argentina. Todo el argentino hoy en día consume Malbec, es lo que más se consume. O sea, es nuestro varietal insignia, es lo que nos representa acá, afuera y en cualquier parte.
Famous wine for a long time. I mean, Peter the Great in Russia, that was his favorite wine, Cahors. And it's 100% Malbec. And it's always been in the Bordeaux blend. It's been a minor grape, but most grape wines in Bordeaux don't use Malbec anymore. And it went to Argentina and sort of took off. For whatever reason, Malbec worked better than Cabernet or Merlot, or was preferred to Cabernet or Merlot in Argentina. And Argentina is a huge wine drinking region. So you started seeing lots and lots of Malbec being produced in Argentina and lots of wine being drunk in Argentina. So the Argentinians themselves are the ones who created the real demand for Malbec.
En las viñas de mi tierra hay un recuerdo querido.
The Argentina-US Malbec relation is almost unique in the world of wine. If, for example, you compare Argentina to Chile, two big wine-producing countries, they're different because Chile doesn't drink most of its wine. It makes most of its wine to export. And Argentina actually produces a lot of the wine. 60% of the wine is made to be sold in Argentina. It's a wine-drinking culture and so forth. When Chile exports, it exports all around the world. The U.S. is one of its targets, but it actually sells more wine to Europe than the United States. For Argentina, it's the U.S. market, number one, and no one else. Canada comes, I think, close to that. It's like the OPEC of Malbec for the United States.
El 40-45% de lo que hoy exporta Argentina es Malbec. En Estados Unidos ese porcentaje se eleva al 60-70%. Por lo tanto, la explosión de la exportación de Malbec es importante.
Foreign influence in the development of winemaking has really helped the area grow. It's become a destination thanks to a lot of the international funds coming in. I don't think that the Argentines alone could have created this change in their winemaking philosophy and their viticulture practices, and as well as their exports. I think that a lot of the boom generated has been because of foreign investment, foreign interest, and folks wanting to secure those investments and be sure and sell their products.
I'm Dana Rothkopf from British Columbia, Canada, and presently one of the owners of Cantinian Wines from Argentina. There was no set plan, but a couple of wine enthusiasts that got carried away with the day, and we started to envision the possibility of operating a wine producing business, but you know, a lot of people think that. It wasn't something we could take seriously. We looked at maybe a dozen properties, and in the same day, we saw 11 that we weren't interested in. We fell in love with this one right away. We took one step at a time, and it seemed to take momentum, and things started to come together, and finally, we ended up buying it. We were owners by November of '06, and our first harvest was in April of '07. Jumping in it seems like an easy thing to do initially, and then you become enveloped in this cloud of paperwork, and you try and sort through it at the same time that you're trying to understand the language. It was like often seemed like a maze where at every turn, you know, you'd have someone giving you directions, and the following day you went back to the same maze and they were pointing you in a different direction. And so you go through waves of frustration and elation maybe. And it was an exciting time.
Well, sitting around the table drinking nice wine one night, figured, hey, where in the world could we possibly afford to run a small vineyard and possibly even build a house there? We looked into it, and it seemed Argentina was the place to be because property prices were relatively low. They'd gone through a currency crunch a couple of years before. And also the price of maintaining vineyard property there, costs of materials, etc., seemed to be reasonable, something we could afford.
So there's a real attraction when you come to a place and say, wow, I can buy this land for, you know, a couple $1,000 an acre, and why would I want to spend $15,000? Or, you know, and people make wrong decisions based on, you know, visiting someplace for 30 days and saying, I want to buy something now.
Armani Estates, only $85,000 for a 5-hectare parcel. What they don't tell you is it's going to cost at the end of the 3 years $300,000, and you've still got the same parcel of dirt that you had from the beginning. When it was sold to us as a potential vineyard property, the last thing on my mind was that we could not be able to grow grapes on this land. It was sold to us that this is going to make fantastic wine in 7 or 8 years, this is going to be top quality Malbec. But when I went down just before harvest, I was horrified. I could not believe it. And it looked like a tractor hadn't been through the place in a month. There was no tracks, there's no footprints in the mud between the vines to show that someone had been in there doing some sort of pruning or maintaining the vines otherwise. And it looked like it hadn't been irrigated in a while either. It just didn't look in great shape, but the thing that I remember the most was the weeds. The weeds were taller than the grapevines in a lot of places. It got to a point where, and I walked through every row of vines with the camera, taking pictures to show my partners what it looked like. And I couldn't even walk through some of the rows of vines. And we're talking about a row of vines that a tractor can pass through because the weeds were so dense. I would have needed a machete.
We basically did what they wanted us to do to a certain extent. You know, like, you know, our dream is to have a 5-hectare Malbec vineyard, and so we would actually do the land preparation, and we would build the infrastructure, you know, the posts, the wires, etc., and plant the plants, and basically just, you know, we took care of all the in the field stuff.
You know, I don't think we're stupid people. You know, I think we're relatively well educated, and we had a bit of a dream, and maybe we were blinded by some of the passion behind, you know, this hobby of owning a vineyard. And I don't think we did our due diligence. I think we went down there and we didn't take the time to necessarily assess the people that we were dealing with and assess the land that we were getting involved with. It sounds great. You know, the Malbec's a fantastic grape. It's a buzzword right now, and everybody's flocking to it. But I think we just have to be careful.
So not all, you know, like vineyard type projects end bad if you're an absentee owner, you know, but certainly there's a lot of homework involved to buy into the right, you know, project. It's difficult to own and operate a small vineyard, and when you don't live there, you know, it's complicated.
if you're going to buy vineyard property, buy it from somebody who knows what they're doing and not from a couple of retired fly fishermen who think they know what they're doing.
I'm not an economist. I just read the bugs that splatter on the windshield.
La industria vitivinícola argentina ha tenido y tiene la posibilidad de tener muy buenos profesionales, muy profesionales realmente con una experiencia muy buena. Hay profesionales que yo siempre he admirado por su calidad técnica y sobre todo por su calidad humana, porque yo siempre digo que en la vida ser buen técnico se aprende con estudio, con dedicación. Ser buena persona es la parte más difícil, es la parte que uno nace con eso. Y una de las personas que yo siempre digo que le tengo mucho aprecio y mucho respeto es Mariano Di Paola, que es gerente técnico de Bodegas La Rural. Es una persona que a mí siempre me ha llegado mucho por su forma de ser en lo profesional, por su forma de ser en lo personal.
Mi nombre es Mariano Di Paola, yo soy director enológico de la bodega. Estamos en este momento en el Valle de Tupungato, en lo que sería la bodega Rutini. En este lugar tenemos plantados 100 hectáreas de viñedo y estamos plantando 150 más justo acá al lado. Esto es una decisión que se tomó hace 3 años de una necesidad urgente de ampliar nuestra capacidad de elaboración de vinos, ya que nuestra demanda crecía año tras año, pero muy marcado. Entonces elegimos hacerlo en el valle, en este lugar, en el medio de los viñedos, donde vamos a tener acá 250 hectáreas de viñedo y después tenemos 100 más en Altamira y 50 en la Consulta.
I think the winemaking environment in Mendoza is very collaborative. I think we all are aware that it's not us once against each other. I think if there's some competition in the winemaking world, it is Argentina versus the rest of the world. We're still so small. We're not taking business away from other Mendoza wineries by exporting more. We're growing the pie. We're growing the cake. And I think every exporting winery in Mendoza knows that. And I've seen examples of collaboration that I would have not suspected.
We are competitive, but we have to work together. And the competition is in the creativity, in the talent, like artists, like writers, like painters. But they know each other, they share things. But they are people and they have their own pride. But you share things also. And it's important in our viticulture to compete, but okay, work together to learn more, because we have to learn more and we have a lot more to give. There's a lot of potential. That is a lot more to give.
Everybody that had a great Malbec vineyard, people talked. Producers talk, they taste each other's wines. And when a producer would find a wine that he loved, he said, "Can I have a few cut-ins?" And there was a generous spirit in Mendoza. There still is a generous spirit in Mendoza, that if somebody asks for your cut-ins, you will allow them access to your cut-ins. So that propagates the best, eliminates the worst.
Y el sol le encanta al Malbec y las primaveras frescas templadas. Y en esta región se da, en este paralelo 32, paralelo 33 del sur, se dan condiciones de suelo y de clima para que el terroir sea perfecto para una buena madurez del Malbec.
You know, the terroir is that combination, if you will, of the place, of the variety, of the year. You know, it's that ultimate combination of all things that go into a harvest year.
Y porque acá la planta esta es muy dócil, para mí es dócil. No es similar ni al semillón ni al chardonnay que hacen champán ni nada, porque esto usted lo pone en un sarmiento, lo deja ahí y brota. Y en cambio las otras son mucho más delicadas, llevan más proceso que esta. Esta es una uva común decirle el álamo acá, el sauce, que lo planta y se da solo. Esto es lo mismo.
We are here at the foothill of the Andes, so we have that cold air coming down from the mountain every single night, with a good temperature difference in between night and day, which help us to maintain a good acidity, which brings all the length into our wine. And the sun here is just the dream for Malbec, and it can mature its tannins and its aromas as we like them.
Many people talk about terroir. What is that? Terroir is the place, the soil, the mesoclimate, and the work of the man. And the work of the man is related to wise thinking, analyzing. And the terroir, you can, as you go deeper in your thinking and your knowledge, you can then get the best of that meaning of terroir.
Malbec in Argentina found its home, and Mendoza found its home. Nowhere else in the world does Malbec give us this very vivid aromas of violets and lavender, these aromas of red and dark fruit depending on the how high the vineyard is. And nowhere except in Mendoza do we get the velvety texture and of that fruit in your mouth. Also, you feel those tannin there. The tannin structure is very present. It's a tannin structure that will allow the wine to live. They are soft tannins, ripe tannins. They will allow the wine to be drunk 6 months after bottling. I think Mendoza and Malbec are made for each other, and we have the DNA pool of Malbec to prove it. We are the true depositories of DNA of Malbec in the world.
What I've written is that the need to take those people who aren't distracted by the shiny things all the time and to find a way to draw them in to Argentina deeper so that they begin to think not just of Malbec, but of Malbecs, first of all, Malbecs from different regions. And so I've been encouraging people in Argentina to try to develop what in the US we would call AVAs, or regional designations, so that consumers can begin to develop their geeky side. And that geekiness, drawing in, wanting to know more, that's an important demographic too. So that Malbec can be more than one thing. It can be that simple, good wine that I have with the hamburger, and it can also be this more serious wine that I want to tell my friends about, that I got this one from the Uco Valley.
I think we should plant more Malbec in different areas, because Malbec is very responsive to terroir, to microclimate, to geology, to exposure. Malbec will give you different wine in every place. In 2003, we took Malbec off the front label of our single vineyard Malbecs because they are so different among themselves that we do not want to confuse the consumer. Because they say, this taste is completely different. Is it the same variety? What's going on? Is it a blend or not? So we took Malbec off the front label, even though it's on the back label with all the neurotic info I like to put on the back label, because they're so different. And I think Malbec planted in different places will give the consumer different wines, all approachable, all early drinking, all soft tannins, that velvety plum fruit, the cassis, the graphite notes, the violet, and the bouquet. But yes, we should plant more Malbec.
I'd say that with the tipping point when we went from push to pull and seeing the folks coming down for tourism, instead of saying, please come taste wine in Argentina, please come discover, I think I'd say in about 2005, when we started to have media backing us up. I think that's when we saw articles in the Wall Street Journal and Wine Spectator, in various avenues, where they're saying, Mendoza, Argentina, the boom bust, and we were starting to get positive press about the wines and the area instead of negative press about the government.
America is different. They judge the wine for what it is, because they're drinking wine. They are not drinking politics, no?
I've been here in New York selling wine for almost 6 years now, and I'd say right about then is when I noticed everyone knew Malbec by then, even. It was just a matter as if they were going to go to that or something else. And yeah, it rolls off the tongue, and it's a go-to wine for people.
There's so much sales in Malbec that it's like the only varietal. Everyone that walks in through the door knows Malbec, so you'll get that a lot. Just because I think people just they get used. They're used to something. They know it's going to be good. They know how to pronounce the name. When we walk in a wine shop and you go, "Hey, how can I help you?" It's like, Malbec.
Everybody's drinking Malbec. Who's not drinking Malbec? Nobody's only drinking Malbec, but everybody who's drinking wine is drinking Malbec. I wouldn't be surprised if Obama's drinking Malbec.
You guys, from your childhood, you are exposed to many, many sweet things. And Malbec has that sweet sensation, has some chocolate, and has that réglisse taste that you love very much. And that's the reason, one of the reasons of the success of the Malbec.
There are a lot of questions about the preference of these consumers. Yeah? In this moment, they have a preference, sweet taste, very young. These are the preference now. The question is, when these people have 40 years or 45 years or 50 years, if the preference remains the same.
It's the way that college-age generation is relating to wine.
That's good, yeah.
They're relating to wine, especially on a social level. It's a little less about the wine and a little more about the people in wine. They aren't impressed by old reputations, and they're willing to make up their own minds. You don't say, Malbec, isn't that an old Bordeaux blending grape? Don't they make almost none of that in France? That's not going to affect the younger wine drinker. They're going to say, well, this is kind of cool, and I can afford it, and they'll drink it.
Everybody talks about falling in love with wine. I think it doesn't happen that way. I think it's a bug. I caught the wine bug, actually. As my dad put it, and he's a medical doctor, it's clearly have all the symptoms of a virus. It's contagious, it's incurable, and it does a lot of damage to your technique.
Wine is always linked to food and cuisine in the US. It's something really amazing now. You have chefs that have been trained from all over the world, and they're not afraid to mix, to blend, to recreate, and not stuck with tradition as we might be elsewhere.
My name's Joanne Weir, and I write cookbooks, have a TV show on PBS, and what else do I do? I'm a journalist, write about food and wine.
I think there's more and more education on wine in the US. People are more and more willing to discover.
We don't have that many Argentinian wines on a
We
wine
don't,
list.
that's correct.
And I don't think ever under a classification of Malbec.
It's great to hear that there are still folks discovering how inviting it is, how easy drinking is, and how complex it can be, and it can captivate you.
But
It's
just
easy drinking.
to discover, I think discovering is too big of a word. Just beginning to discover.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Because you're talking.
Well, I think that this attitude, being willing to try something different and just have fun and experiment, has served Malbec very well. because it's that different product. It kind of ticks the boxes. Many of the wines are very reasonably priced, although they come in at all price ranges. The wines are actually more than one-dimensional. Malbecs are, in terms of the quality of the wine, at this point at least, good value. It's the red wine, it's not Shiraz, and it's an easily understandable brand, like Australian Shiraz was. You can go there and you can pick virtually any Argentinian Malbec from the shelf, and you have a pretty good idea what you're getting. If you're interested, you can dig down and figure out, well, how does the Uco Valley differ from Luan de Cuyo and the red fruits and black fruits, and you can dive into it all you want. But if you're just looking for something to go with that hamburger, well, you can pull it off the shelf and you pretty much have it. These variety of forces have guided consumers, I think, to trying Malbec, and I think that they've been pretty happy so far.
So the gaminess on this nose, I think, appeals to me, and it's the little dustiness and a little hint of that green, and the cassis really pops for me on the tail end of the nose. So. This is the really most interesting conversation I think that can be had about Malbec. This will rival and challenge an enormous amount of $50 to $75 wines, yet everybody wants to keep talking about Malbec as a $7 to $15 wine. And I think, from my standpoint, I think it's being mispositioned and totally underestimated for its potential in the high end. When you taste this wine, this tastes like, there's a lot of Bordeaux getting away with charging close to $100 for what we're tasting here. And so I think that needs to be something that is talked about more and brought to the forefront of the conversation, because it's really immersing itself and it can really become a one-trick pony varietal. I think it's dangerous for a varietal that has this much high-end potential.
Think about these things. Think about the regions and the complexity and the fact that this is a way to develop a more sophisticated interest, because you're going to have to raise prices. And so you want to give people a wine with a terroir story, with a human story, a wine with a relationship, so that they'll be willing to pay more for the wine and the story and the deeper understanding than they will for the simple commodity.
Bueno, mi nombre es Carmelo Patti, soy enólogo, trabajando desde 1971 como enólogo, pero un poco mis raíces dedicadas al vino vienen un poco de herencia de mi abuelo. Mi abuelo hacía vino en Italia para la familia. Mi padre hacía vino también, y bueno, yo vine importado de allá, casi en un paquete porque tenía apenas un año. Y cuando mi padre llega a la Argentina, realmente encontró como un paraíso aquí, de la carne y de las cosas, pero no gustaba el vino que compraba en una bodega. Así que se puso a hacer su vino. Y bueno, y de pequeño me ponía a pisar las uvas, así que yo ayudaba a él a hacer el vino.
You have to be ready for change all the time, because you're dealing with the weather. Right now, I have fear that there's going to be hail in the next 15 minutes. So there's always something. You can hear the cannons in the background shooting into the hail clouds right now. There's so many challenges. At times it's invigorating, and at times there's fear in your heart. There's a lot of variance. It's a roller coaster ride.
La vitivinicultura es algo bien difícil. Es algo difícil porque tienes que jugar con un jugador que no está de tu lado a veces, que es la naturaleza. Y cuando parece que la naturaleza la superaste en el viñedo, es un acto de fe, pero tienes que creer que en la bodega también sigue la naturaleza actuando. Y a veces te juega malas pasadas. A llevarlo con la mayor de las alegrías, sobreponerte y hacer Más fuerte todavía, cuando te sucedan esas cosas, no seas viticultor.
La cosa más difícil para hacer vino son los famosos últimos 10 días antes que la uva esté madura y que tristemente llega granizo, llega la piedra o hay una intensa lluvia que hace engordar la uva y a uno pierde todas las ilusiones de lograr un buen vino, porque se necesita una uva sana, completamente madura para hacer un vino correcto. Entonces lo difícil es cuando la uva no está viniendo en el punto ideal de madurez y de sanidad. El resto de cosas difíciles también puede ser el país, porque si la economía del país es difícil, no es fácil hacer vino si no tenemos los recursos económicos tranquilos y la mente tranquila para diseñar el mejor vino.
We had to face a lot of challenges, like everyone does in this business, and coming up against weather issues, which is farming and typical every year. Seems to be a 25 or 30% loss. Maybe we're lucky to only have that much loss. Some people have 100. Somehow we got through all that and ended up with really good wine right away. I don't know, sometimes you just shook your head and went, wow, how did we pull it off, you know? Mind you, it wasn't easy. We went through a lot of challenges, but we came out on top and felt very confident. We finally got some good wine in a bottle, learned how to export, gained a market, kept learning about wine and language. We're into the reality now, and I guess the honeymoon's over.
My name's Derek Flegel. I just moved to Argentina and I'm trying to get my foot in the door. I met Dana totally by random encounter where I was talking to some other expats in Mendoza, and she just happened to walk in the door and they said, oh, you like wine, right? Well, he's got his own winery. So from there I just sent him an email and said, look, I'm sure you hear it all the time, but I'd love to come help out. And he wrote me back and said, all right, be at my house at 7 a.m. and I'll take you out to the vineyard. I got 15, I might have another 1 or 2 more. But yeah, that's an honest day's work right there. So that's 15 times 4. It's 60 pesos. $15 for. So I'm getting up at 6 and got out here at we set by 9 o'clock we were picking. So yeah, it is what it is. You gotta do it.
Creemos que somos personas que nos levantamos temprano y nos acostamos tarde, siempre trabajando, siempre tratando de buscar lo mejor. Pero mi objetivo es, yo siempre digo que yo a los 45 años me quiero retirar, tengo 40, pero cuando digo me quiero retirar, no quiero vivir la vida que vivo ahora, quiero disfrutar un poco más, porque yo mi vida no la he disfrutado prácticamente, ¿sí? Y siempre tengo el temor ese de que no haber conocido a mi abuelo, no haber disfrutado a mi padre, que por lo menos mis hijos me puedan disfrutar un cierto tiempo más en la vida.
No, lo que decía Héctor es muy cierto, que yo como también desde muy chico nuestro padre falleció y que quedé muy impresionado con todo eso y en cierta forma a Héctor lo tomé como un referente mío y donde yo tenía que llegar. Y bueno, yo creo que también eso hizo de que nosotros fuésemos tan unidos. Y creo que gracias también a todo eso, a esa etapa que vivimos, que si bien fue muy dura, ha hecho de que nosotros podamos trabajar juntos.
In Argentina, inflation is almost a cultural thing. It often comes down to just a person's point of view of the future. And if you think things are going to go up in price and you have something to sell, what do you naturally want to do? You want to sell it for as much as you can today, and the next day you maybe want to sell it for a little bit more. In order to hedge yourself, you want to push up that price a little bit more. Even so, if it keeps going like that, right? Let's just say it just keeps going like that, there's no check and no solution. Well, people will keep raising price until they really honestly get to the price level of all the great wines of the world. And it's not to say that the best Malbecs don't deserve to compete with those same prices, but if you're new to the wine world and suddenly entry-level Malbecs are $15, for $15 you can taste a lot of different wines. And really, that's the beginner entry-level Malbec. If you're getting to something that's good, now suddenly you're in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And that is where the best wines of the world are right now. So if you get pushed into that price point, what's the reason to drink Malbec other than that it's great? And I guess all of us Malbec producers and people in the business hope that people will realize and give an equivalency of greatness to Malbec. But if they don't, and if they are looking for the next best deal, Malbec may fade a little bit. I think certainly Malbec, some people will still buy Malbec, some people will still sell Malbec, but that boom, I think, would officially be over.
I noticed that there are always new labels from Argentina at the wine shops. And I thought, well, this is great. This must show how successful it is, because there's always someone new entering it. But a study that I saw indicated that for every 2 new ones that come in, 2 or 3 have been squeezed out because they can't find the market, because the costs are so much. So that there's really a churning that's going on in the wine industry, and it's not advancing it as well. It does seem like that if the exchange rate in particular doesn't change for Argentina, or if the inflation rate isn't brought under control, this will be a major factor in slowing down the boom and maybe halting it.
Estoy diciendo que, en definitiva, no es favorable el dólar en este momento para exportar en Argentina, pero que el gobierno está comprando porque podría ser peor la situación y que tenemos que dejar pasar la tormenta y, bueno, esperar mejor días.
As much as we think it's great, there's still a large portion of the wine world that, won't give it the time of day.
So then what is your impression of Malbec? Where does that fit in your
Oh, you haven't gotten it yet. I hate Malbec. It doesn't taste like anything. It tastes like maybe some red fruit, maybe, another person, everybody's favorite word, spicy. Everyone wants a spicy wine these days, so I hope you're serving spicy wine at your wine bar. I'd rather have something interesting. And then they're so cheap that they're just high yields, there's no concentration to them, no complexity. And then, or you can get a really expensive one because they oak the shit out of it. So great, I'm gonna pay for Barrique. I'm gonna taste oak flavors. Awesome.
We're talking about just a tiny sliver of the wine market. It's booming in the areas where it's most visible. It's booming in many retail shops, many restaurants, many people that like to talk about wine and drink wine are interested in Malbec. But for the average big metropolitan wine shop, it's still a tiny sliver of what's out there.
My name is Vic. This is Soho Wines and Spirits, best wine store in Soho. I get a plug too, don't I?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Do you think you'll expand your selection to include more than 5?
No, I think in our store we have amount of wall space, amount of bottles that you can fit in each spot is limited, and so you have to make decisions. And I think that at the moment we try to have one in various price ranges so to cover it all. So it may not have the exact one that you're looking for, but we'll have one that will be comparable to it.
Great.
But I think, half a dozen is about good for that particular niche.
There's a lot of unsung heroes in the wine world, and I think that the salesman is certainly one of them. It's one of the most thankless jobs I've ever had.
I can't take up more than one seat because it's illegal, but I try to take up as much room as I can so I can take notes, write emails. I do a lot of work on this stuff. I spend a lot of time.
Are you in a hurry?
I am in a hurry.
Are you always in a hurry?
I am always in a hurry, especially when the train doesn't come for 15 minutes.
You go in and you talk to a buyer that oftentimes doesn't care if you're there or not?
I don't know. I confirmed with the guy today at like 1 p.m. and told him we'd be there at 4:30. And apparently he was just let go. So I showed up for the meeting and he's not there anymore. But the reason I'm so upset is because I don't really have an in at that place other than him. And he was really open to my portfolio, and it's a very corporate run restaurant. So it's hard to get an in, and now my in is gone.
It's so competitive. Oftentimes, to be able to sell a bottle of wine, let's say to a retail shop, you have to unseat, get rid of one. The proposition for the person that owns or manages the store is to move one out so you can move in. It's tough. It's like trying to find an apartment, when there isn't one, and everybody, you got to kick somebody out on the street to get your apartment. You can think about all the wines the world's really honestly trying to press into the United States through this filter. And so there's levels of importers and distributors and salespeople that are all honestly resisting taking on more wines. And only the good ones make it through. And then the salesperson, in order to take that bottle and actually get it so it can sell, has to make it through that last gatekeeper, that last person who's going to decide the fate for that wine.
That's delicious.
It is really tasty.
Is the price point the same, or?
It's just a touch lower. It's actually $120 on the front line. So that's $10 even. And it's $108 on 3 and $96 on 5, so that's $8 a bottle.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Disfruto muchísimo cuando visito el país, pasear por las tiendas de vinos y ver esas góndolas llenas de vinos de todo el mundo y gente que entra y se lleva un vino australiano, un vino neozelandés, un vino argentino, un vino chileno, y eso me parece maravilloso porque habla de diversidad, de complejidad cultural, de oportunidades para todos, que es algo que me gusta del espíritu americano.
This is World Malbec Day, first ever great event promoting the Malbec wine of Argentina here in New York City, the biggest event, but it's also events going on all over the world, educating people on this amazing grape and very tasty too.
We're very, very happy how the American consumers and the rest of the world are enjoying our Malbecs, our diversity, our character, our personality, and we're really, really happy to see how these consumers are celebrating today such an important day for us.
Malbec is a signature wine of Argentina. Is the heart of the wine in Argentina.
Basically, this was kind of the brainchild of Wines of Argentina to make the world familiar with this varietal, because not a lot of people know what it is. It's not like a Merlot or a Cab. So that's really the genesis of the day.
I don't know a lot of wine knowledge to add, but I think it's got like a peppery bite to it, which is something that I look for in a wine.
I discovered it when I turned 21. I'm 24, so I've been drinking wine for legally for 3 years. The reason I love it is because it's really apparent what's aged and what's not, and how it's aged. And I think that the fruits that they use and what's put into the soil and everything really is very characteristic to every Malbec. From what I've been tasting, it's just really obvious what flavors come out because of how it's aged or the care that's been put into it. So that's why I love Malbecs.
I think the wine is amazing. I think it's nice and smooth, it's delicious. As an Italian, we drink wine since we're little, so it's fabulous. I mean, the wine was fantastic.
It's the best wine. It's the best wine in the world. And we're very happy that Argentinian wines are taking their place in the world stage of wines. Very important.
El Malbec es el vino mendocino por excelencia y argentino, así que los invitamos a todos y bueno, muy feliz de estar aquí.
What do you know of Malbec Day? What do you think of the idea of Malbec Day?
I think it was really smart of the Argentinian Wine Association to have a whole day for their premier grape.
But come on,
But
tell us what you really think.
I mean, what the hell kind of holiday is? What is this supposed to do? I mean, do they expect everyone to jump on the bandwagon and do a Malbec sale tomorrow? Are we supposed to put up a banner in front of the restaurant saying, come and drink Malbec here? I'm not subscribing to that.
I'm sure they'd love it if you did.
I'm sure they would. Well, maybe if they send me a phone call, maybe a check, maybe a few other things, maybe a lifetime supply of Malbec, I would be so happy to do it.
Hoy por hoy les puedo decir que para mí la industria vitivinícola es una filosofía de vida. Es un proyecto que nosotros hemos comenzado pensando en dejar algo que algunos de nuestros hijos, en el caso mío yo tengo 3 hijos, Pablo va a ser papá el próximo año, que bueno, que nuestra familia pueda desarrollar lo que nosotros hemos empezado a construir, ¿sí? Y en cierta medida es un poco, como yo siempre digo, devolverle a la vida lo que la vida nos dio. Nosotros nacimos del campo y bueno, devolverle a nuestras generaciones un poco esa vida de campo, donde es una vida sana, donde es una vida donde se pueden hacer grandes cosas, donde es una vida donde se puede llevar un país y mostrarlo en el mundo, como se está haciendo hoy por hoy con Argentina.
I think we have to be very careful and of keeping our quality, not losing sight of the long-term goal, which is to be a participant in the world wine market for decades to come, for centuries to come. It is not as decades ago that you could bask in your success and sleep on your laurels. The market is very demanding nowadays. You come up with a bad harvest and they will not buy it.
Micro world, this little bubble, and what we are happening here and what we're participating in isn't happening even across the water in New Jersey. So I would say that sometimes I live in a bubble, and I'd like to believe that the wine world, everyone cares about natural wine now, but maybe it could just be here in this one bar.
Trend has started, but I think it's only going to grow.
And we could have been in there from almost the beginning.
Almost, that's when we went down there. We said, to us this was the next Napa Valley, and now we're going to get in when we can afford it. And we're going to be laughing in 20 years. It's going to be great.
Bueno, en todo este mundo moderno que se van dando diferentes cambios por ahí de moda, de los vinos, y para mí no va a cambiar. Puede venir las modas que quiera, mi estilo no va a cambiar. Malbec como Malbec, Cabernet como Cabernet. Usted va a cambiar, yo no tengo que cambiar.
We talk about wine. I'm sure that this is going to keep increasing a lot. But Argentina, like a government, you never know what could happen. You never know what happened tomorrow. So it's our history.
Wine drinkers go for fads, and I think it's too soon to tell whether Malbec is a permanent versus a trend pattern in American wine market. I think probably it's very well established. I'm not too worried, but you never know. The people who made Merlot thought that they had it made. The people who made Shiraz thought they had it made. So Malbec, who knows what could happen there.
I think that's what you get with boutique wines. You get just that little extra attention, and normally you can taste the difference. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Malbec's here to stay.
Todas estas inversiones extranjeras que han venido buscando en las tierras argentinas vinos con otros potenciales, todo esto nos debe servir para mostrar al mundo que Argentina es más que Malbec, tiene posibilidades de ofrecer otros vinos al mundo.
I think the popularity of Malbec is keeping our enthusiasm alive, but at the same time we have to be guarded about that because, you know, fashion comes and goes. The Malbec's fantastic and the quality's there and it's real. It's not based on some false image, but if it's a boom, booms end. We can't have this false hope that it'll continually climb, you know. We can't think that way or we'll end up like all the bankrupt people losing their homes in the US right now.
El Malbec me parece que es una marca registrada de la Argentina definitivamente. Es como, un jugador de fútbol que nació circunstancialmente en un país, pero triunfa en el otro. ¿Qué te queda, digamos? La cuestión genética, la cuestión sanguínea, pero la realidad es que nosotros vemos jugadores como eso, ¿no? Como David Trezeguet, por ejemplo, que es argentino, pero triunfó en la selección francesa. Entonces fue campeón con Francia y ya lo perdimos desde ese punto, ¿no? Y bueno, triunfó vistiendo la camiseta francesa. Y el Malbec triunfó con la camiseta argentina.
Dentro la tasca di un qualunque mattino, dentro la tasca ti porterei, col fazzoletto di cotone e profumo, col fazzoletto ti nasconderei. Dentro la tasca di un qualunque mattino, dentro la tasca ti nasconderei e con la mano che non veda nessuno, e con la mano ti accarezzerei. Salirà il sole del mezzogiorno, passerà alto sopra di noi, fino alla tasca del pomeriggio. Ti porto ancora se ancora mi vuoi. Salirà il sole del mezzogiorno e passerà alto molto sopra di noi, fino alla tasca del pomeriggio. Dall'altra tasca ti porto se vuoi. Dentro la tasca di un qualunque mattino, dentro la tasca ti porterei, col fazzoletto di seta e profumo, col fazzoletto ti coprirei. Dentro la tasca di un qualunque mattino, dentro la tasca ti nasconderei e con la mano che non veda nessuno, e con la mano ti saluterei e con la mano ma che non veda nessuno, con questa mano